Thanks once again for joining us. This is Greg. We do a backwards perspective based on our Bob Lutz comments over time and take a look at sort of where we've been and where we're headed. Primarily because in this show, not only in 2024 was the Model Y the #1 seller in Europe, but the #2 seller was the Model 3. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. Please join us in helping us to maintain and grow the channel by joining us on Patreon for also better ideas on investing and trading. Also, please note your likes and comments also influence how broadly the shows get distributed by Google. So we're kind of rushing into, well, what does Tesla's future look like in light of recent developments? I kept reviewing this, and there's some ideas I have of sort of influencing factors that will shape the future of EVs and Tesla. So there's a question, so as usual, our structure here today is sort of a backwards perspective on Tesla. You saw the images that we opened with of initially the fact that GM and others got together to get rid of all the electric streetcars so we could increase the number of buses and tires being sold and fuel being sold back in the 30s or the 20s and 30s. Next, you also saw some video or some images of the fact that GM had come out with an electric vehicle, and there are many consumers, despite all its limitations, that wanted to keep that vehicle, but they were sort of forcefully taken from those buyers and crushed, which we also included. Now, a question that comes up is, when those things were crushed, was it because they weren't good vehicles? And the demand for consumers to keep them tells us that the electric option has always been attractive to consumers. It's just a question of whether or not the domestic auto would allow consumers to keep those vehicles, and obviously the answer was no. So the next question then is, well, why did they not want those vehicles to be kept by consumers? And I believe the answer to that is competitive advantage. So if you have large parts distribution warehouses that will go back 10 years worth of parts on for all the vehicles that you have on the roads, and your competitors don't have that, that's one of many ways that you can sort of control the marketplace. So if we potentially move away from that into this whole new realm of electric vehicles, there are many competitive advantages like those parts facilities that start to disappear as an advantage. So, and clearly with GM and others, they also have a challenge because they're 25% vertically integrated, where Tesla's 90% vertically integrated. And so therefore, more control, more flexibility to deliver great new vehicles that are winning in the marketplace. So, as you know, Bob indicated that Tesla has no competitive advantages, #1, and #2, there are large numbers of competitors that are after Tesla, and those 100 vehicles produced by competitors were going to make life difficult for Tesla. What we've come to find is completely the opposite. Consumers are all over the globe are embracing electric vehicles, and as they do so, they're cutting into the competitive advantages that have been enjoyed by the ICE or internal combustion engines for decades. So, the question is, well, what do we miss here, and how does what we miss influence what we're going to see in the future? I have a thing about computers. It's my belief that computers are, obviously they're a huge part of our present, and they're going to be a huge part of our futures as well. And I believe that there's a real challenge for the ICE manufacturers right now, which is all the people in power. It's kind of like in football. They talk about you have this problem where many of the defensive coaches don't have an appreciation for the offensive side of the football that allows them to win against offensive-minded coaches. In this case, we have an issue with the fact that they're ICE-minded, or internal combustion is the best, and it's what consumers want, minded folks. And the reality is the consumers are saying, when head-to-head, we prefer to have an electric vehicle. So based on the fear exhibited against these vehicles by GM and others, it seems quite clear that the ICE manufacturers have known for a long time, for decades, how devastating allowing people to have access to electric vehicles might be. And we're now seeing that play out with Tesla. So the final part of the show I wanted to enter is, well, are the trends going to be reversed? Because in theory, the ICE vehicles or the electric vehicles will get better and therefore be more of a challenge for Tesla. You know, I think that there is a problem with, you know, what consumers value most. In theory, everyone with a lot of money should be buying a Lucid vehicle just because they have 500 or 600 miles of range, etc. But this is really interesting to watch because, you know, I remember one executive pointing out for his 7 Series Beamer, I'm actually not interested in a lot of GPS and other gee whiz stuff, because if I want to go somewhere that's a long distance out, I'm going to fly there. And if I'm not flying there, then in general I can find everything I need in the general area that I live in. So we're offering consumers a lot of choice, a lot of options, but the question is, what are people actually using? And beyond that, a big question that's lurking right now is marginal utility. So in economics, there's a concept called marginal utility. And so how it relates to this environment is that Tesla offers a certain range. Tesla offers a certain performance. One of the ways to unseat Tesla is simply offer better performance at similar price points. And if you can't do that, it's going to be hard to unseat them. Hence, this is why I believe we've seen not only the Model Y become #1, but #2 is the Model 3 in Europe. We're going to see how those numbers play out here in the United States. But in general, I believe that Tesla will continue to do well. And as Elon calms down, Tesla becomes a dominant company. I actually wanted to do a discussion of Tesla's secret weapon, which I think will be our next show, because I think it'll further open up the gap between the two companies. Obviously, one of the biggest issues is economies of scale, and Tesla being #1 starts to accumulate a large number of advantages that competitors sort of won't be able to deal with. This is the end of our discussion today. So, Mr. Lutz, I'm afraid your demise of Tesla prediction did not occur. And in fact, the giant auto companies you expected would dominate are in essence now having to capitulate to the success Tesla's enjoyed around the globe. I wanted to note that we encourage you to do a 20-minute walk each day. Also wanted to encourage you to think about something called intervals. So instead of just doing a consistent 20-minute walk, wanted to encourage you to consider sort of power walking for short bursts, 2 or 3 minute bursts. And this gives you a more rigorous workout without having to walk as far. So again, you may want to look up a concept called intervals, and I think you'll find it useful in your process. At any rate, once again, I want to thank you for joining us. Please take time to like and subscribe. We also would appreciate any input, particularly in Europe, if you're seeing more or less Teslas, and what are other owners saying or buyers. We've had some unfortunate things happening with Tesla, but I think the mandate to move electric, and probably do so with Tesla, will be maintained. And any input you might have would be greatly appreciated. Once again, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks again for joining us. Tschüss, au revoir, namaste, arrivederci, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and bye for now.